And then it's time to start to get to know your plants. So there's a lot of different plants that work well in fairy gardens. And one of the things I love about fairy gardens is it does give you the opportunity and the drive to get to know plants better. You're going to get to know them by name, and you're going to get to know them by what they require. How much light do they need in a day, and how much water do they need in a day? When you go to the nursery, if you're going to purchase things, I always just wander around and look for things that catch my eye. And then once I found something, I love coleus. It has so many interesting leaf patterns and colors to it. If you pull out the tag will tell you on it how much light the plant requires, as well as how much water. This one says it prefers a well-drained soil, but water freely in dry weather. It should tell you about how big the plant will get, and the SP stands for spacing, so how far apart should you plant them. So they look pretty small right now, and when you put them in a container, they look pretty small, but over the season they are going to grow. So these tiny little plants are going to get to be a foot to 14 inches high, and they'll fill right in too. So I want to think about putting them around 10 inches away from each other. Okay, so definitely check your tags. Overall, for fairy gardens, because we're on a small scale, you're going to want to look for things that maintain tiny leaves or have small flowers on them. If it's a slow-growing plant, that's even better, because then you don't have to worry that it's going to outgrow its container and overshadow any fairy accessories that you may have built through the season. So when you're combining different kinds of plants for a container, it's really important to make sure that you put plants together that like the same things. So you don't want to put a shade-loving plant and a sun-loving plant together in the same container, because someone's not going to be happy there. Same way with water. You wouldn't put succulents, which don't like a lot of water, in with something like basil that does like water. So those two plants aren't going to live well together in the same container. So if you definitely want to do succulents and you definitely want to do herbs, I just recommend making more than one fairy garden. I have multiples around my house for that very reason. Some of my favorite plants to use are the ones pictured here. Succulents are really fun to use, and they're really easy to take care of because they don't require a lot of water. And there are so many interesting kinds of succulents right now. You can find them everywhere. They're even for sale at the grocery store. So that is definitely a fun way to do a fairy garden. And they, for the most part, are fairly slow growing, but they do expand. Herbs are another great choice. I love herb gardening, and one of the examples I'll show you in the putting it together video is of an herb garden for fairies. Johnny jump ups are another fun one. They come up, they're one of the first spring blossoms. They're really hardy plants, so they tolerate cold pretty well, so you can start them early. And their tiny little blossoms are so cute and colorful, and they do come in a variety of colors. And you saw in the bundt pan earlier in the container section, I did have a little Johnny jump up that reseeded itself and came back from last year's planting. Alyssum is one of my favorite plants to use, period, because it smells so good. So if you're at a nursery or greenhouse and you see this plant growing, go ahead and take a nice deep breath in that. It smells so lovely. And in a hot summer day when the wind is up a little bit and that alyssum fragrance gets on the air, I just love it. Alyssum has tiny little white flowers too, which I think lend themselves well to the fairy world. Typically it comes in white or sometimes purples. And this video is going to show you how to transplant plants from, if you buy them at the nursery, into your container. I don't think the sound comes across very well, so I am going to talk over it while it's happening. So first you're going to want to make sure that the plants have been watered well. So if they've dried out at all, don't try to transplant them. Give them a good soak, let it settle in so that it's a nice moist soil before you start doing this. Okay. And then what I'm doing is pinching the bottom of the container just to try to loosen the plant up a little bit, and then grasping it close to the soil from the top while I'm pinching and pulling at the same time to loosen it up and pop it out. Sometimes it will help if you tip the container over a little bit too. And then you're going to check the root growth, and you can see on this one that some of the roots are starting to grow around the bottom, and that's called root bound, and it's not good for the plant. Those will keep growing in circles if you let them. So I'm gently pulling away the ones along the bottom because I want to encourage the roots to grow down, not around the soil there. And then because this is tiny, I don't really need any tools. I can just use my hand to move my soil around, find a little pocket for it, tuck it in, and then tap it down and press firmly. And then I would give it a nice good water when all the plants are in so that it gets a good dose of moisture to start with.